All right, guys, welcome back. It feels like it's been a long time since we've done a video, but converting percents, decimals, and fractions, I feel like that's something a lot of you can do really well already, and I feel like it's something that there's a good chunk of you that need to practice and have a reminder. So we're gonna take a few minutes today, and I'm gonna show you how to convert between percents, decimals, and fractions in two different ways, how to do it by hand and how to do it on the calculator. This year, I'm not really too worried about you doing it by hand. That was last year. We want to use these conversions. That's just a small step of bigger math problems that we're doing. So we're going to focus on you just being able to do it. To tell you the truth, I don't really care how you do it, as long as you can get there. So we're going to start with a fraction. Since we're talking about rational numbers here, we're going to start with the fraction 5/8. And we want to convert that fraction to a decimal. So I've got this arrow here showing that we're going from fractions to decimals. And the way that what we're really doing mathematically is we are dividing the numerator by the denominator. 5/8, that means 5 divided by 8. And so one way to turn it into a decimal is to just put that in your calculator. You do 5 divided by 8, and you get 0.625. So our decimal becomes 0.625. That's what this fraction bar means, right? It means divide. Now, another way to put that in the calculator, if you can't remember 5 divided by 8, is if we just put 5/8, if we use our fraction button and put 5/8 in, we've got this, we call it the best friend button down here because especially today, it's really gonna be your best friend. It's gonna do most of the math for you. We hit this little arrow, this is our convert arrow, and this is going to convert it to a decimal for us. So when I hit enter, it tells me 0.625. So it does the same mathematical process that we just did. So you can either divide the numerator by the denominator, or you can push your best friend button. And that'll do it for you. All right, so you either one of those, again, I don't care how you do it, I just care that you can do it. And what's nice about this best friend button is it actually lets us go the other way around. If I have a decimal, if I want to go back to a fraction, mathematically that takes some work. We have to read it as 625 thousandths, and then we have to write it, simplify it, and that's a big ugly mess. But our best friend button, it makes our life a little bit easier. If I put the decimal, best friend button, enter, it does the fraction for me. So we can use that button to go back and forth between fractions and decimals. All right, so now that we have the decimal, we want to turn it into a percent, which is even easier than what we did before, because to turn a decimal into a percent, all we have to do is move the decimal point. And if I'm going from a decimal to a percent, I'm getting bigger. I'm getting a bigger number. So I have to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So my 0.625, I move this 2 places, and I end up between the 2 and the 5. So that becomes 62.5%. I can also do that backwards. I can go from a percent to a decimal doing the same thing, but when I go from a percent to a decimal, I get smaller. So to go backwards, and if you want to put a little backwards arrow here on the inside, to go backwards from a percent to a decimal, we're going to move the decimal 2 to the left. I'm just going to move it 2 to the left, and that takes it back to a decimal for me. So the easiest way to remember that, I know if you move it to the left or the right, which one are you supposed to do? Percents are bigger than decimals. So when we go from a decimal to a percent, our number needs to get bigger. When we go the other way, when we're going to a decimal, that's smaller than a percent. So we're going to move it to the left. We're going to make it a smaller number. All right? Now, percents to fractions. Again, there's a shortcut on the calculator that we'll talk about in just a minute, but to do a percent to a fraction, mathematically what we're doing is we're going to write the percent over 100. So we're going to write the percent over 100, or in other words, I'm going to put 62 62.5 over 100. That means 62.5%. That means the same thing that this does. But we don't like decimals in our fractions here, so we're going to simplify that. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do it. Again, this year, all I care about is that you can do it. So if I put that as a fraction, if I push my fraction button, 62.5 on top, 100 on bottom, and I hit enter, it turns it into a decimal, which we don't want. We don't want a decimal. We want it as a fraction, which we can get easily by hitting our best friend button. And that tells me 5/8. That takes me back to my original fraction. The other way that you can do it, there's a button on here that you can use to convert numbers going the other way around. If I want to go from a fraction to a percent, if I want to take my 5/8 and I want to turn that into a percent, I have this little button right here that says it has that change convert arrow, and that converts it to a percent. So that's how I go backwards. If I want to go from a fraction to a percent, I can use my change to percent button to do that. Going from a percent to a fraction, if I were you, I would just put the fraction in the calculator and convert it. I would just put the 62.5 over 100. Let it turn it into a decimal. Who cares? Because we have a button that turns it into a fraction. That might be the easiest way. Some of you have found the percent button. You can also do 62.5, and then there's this percent button right here. And if I convert that one, just by hitting enter, it does it for me again. So really, this button here is going to do most of the work for you today. That best friend button is going to do a lot of it for you. You just need to be able to recognize what you're changing to. So let's just do some quick practices. And I'm going to go kind of fast because I feel like we can. So right now I'm starting with 0.02. And I want to convert that into a fraction. So I'm going to hit my best friend button. And I find out that that is 1 over 50 as a fraction. And I want to convert that to a percent, so I'm going to hit my convert to percent button, and that tells me that that is 2%, which would have been the same as if I had moved my decimal 2 places. All right. So number 2, we're going from a percent backwards. We have to go from a percent to a decimal and then a fraction. The easiest way to go to the decimal is just to move that decimal point to the left. I'm getting smaller, so I move it to the left, and I get 0.437. Now I want to convert this ugly decimal into a fraction. So I'm going to put 0.437, and I'm going to hit my best friend button, and that tells me 437 over 1,000. That's the nicest fraction I can get with that number. And that's okay. I'm all right with that fraction. It's okay that it's a big number. So next one, decimal, 1.4. Let's turn it into a percent. Let's move that 1 2 places. And if you notice there's not a number here, we can pretend, well, there is, it's a 0. We just don't see it when we write 1.4. But we're going to see it now that we're converting it to a percent. So we moved it 1 2 places. I have to add the 0. So that's 140%, which is weird to get a percent bigger than 100, but my decimal is bigger than 1. So that makes sense that my percent would be bigger than 100. Now to go to a fraction, let's just do quick 1.4. Let's turn it into a fraction with our best friend button, and I get 7/5. That is my simplified, easiest fraction. All right, this next one, 2 3/10. We have the fraction, we want to turn it into a decimal. And there's a couple of different ways that I can do this. I know that because there's a 2 out in front, my decimal is going to have a 2. And 3/10, that might be one that you have memorized, and that's just 0.3. That's one you might be able to do in your head. But if not, let's just convert it in the calculator. I want to put in a mixed number, so I hit my second, and I've got this fraction button that lets me make a mixed number. So I do 2 3/10, and I want to turn that into a decimal. And it tells me that that is 2.3, that I was thinking correctly. So my decimal is 2.3. To go to a percent, I'm just going to move the decimal 2 places because that's faster than pushing buttons on my calculator. So I move it 1 2, which is going to add a 0. So I've got 230 100%, which makes sense because I'm at 2.3, and if 1 is 100%, then 2 is 200%, plus I have a little bit more. So you've got a few problems over here on your own. I know we went really fast today. I'm okay with that. I think a lot of you can pick this up, and if not, let the calculator help you out. So try these problems on your own. When you're finished, come let me see them, make sure that you're doing things correctly, and I'll give you the practice for the day. Good luck.